can never duplicate ever walking onto a field for the rest of your life and the feeling you have when there's 100,000 people cheering either for you or against you. When stuff goes bad or when things go wrong in the NFL, as a player, like, they're going to cut you, no matter what your contract is, right? As long as I was in a locker room and on a field, I felt like once I got an opportunity to prove that, I'd be fine. We got a good group down here. We got a chance to do this. We got Brady.
What was it like with Gronk? What was he like?
He's everything you see on TV. Yeah, I think there's an interesting thing when it comes to parents. Like, I think you can either go too far and drive them one way, or it can be the right thing for that person. I've been smart with what I have put away from my playing days, but I still need a purpose, right?
Yeah.
Like, I need a something to wake up in the morning and get me out of bed, right?
Thanks for coming. It's obviously, for those who don't know, this is AQ Shipley. Met him playing golf with our friend back there. We can't see, he's not on camera. Recently in California during the summer. And we were just talking about his life after NFL, and he was telling me that he was doing some stuff with Pat McAfee, which led me to say, I have a podcast. It's not quite the same, but I've got a nice studio, and he was nice enough to be actually excited to come on and do this with me, so I thought it'd be cool. And he's got a lot of cool stories, tons of cool stories that we can only get into, probably some legally, but some we don't have time for everything today. But sure. So AQ, have you always gone by AQ?
Yeah,
it's Alan Quay, right?
Yeah, so my dad's Alan as well, different middle name, Henry middle name. So growing up, once I started to kind of sound like him, once I hit like 7th grade, you hit puberty, your voice change. It's like, oh, hey, Alan. It's like, no, this is AQ, and that's just kind of how it went about.
Nice. So you grew up in Pennsylvania?
Grew up in Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh, and then graduated high school in 2004. From there, went to Penn State, played football up there from 04 to 08.
Did you always want to go to Penn State?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, no. I mean, I grew up, and it wasn't even – I think I rooted for Pitt. I think I rooted for Notre Dame. Those were like I grew up an Irish Catholic family, so Notre Dame was always on TV, and then I grew up in Pittsburgh, so University of Pittsburgh was always on the TV, and so grew up there. My sister went to Pitt, and so I had a lot of exposure to that campus. So I'd go down there on the weekends while I was in high school, and they're recruiting me hard, and I kind of started going there, and I'm like, this is not it. It was right when they switched stadiums where they were playing where the Steelers play, and so I'm going to these games and 65,000 seat stadium, they're maybe putting 25,000 people in the stands, and I'm like, and then I'm going to a Steeler game the next day, and I'm like, this is the atmosphere I want, right? And so then when I started to get, my first 4 offers, I think, were Pitt, Penn State, Michigan State, and Syracuse, and that was like, I think, my sophomore year, and then going into my junior year, the floodgates opened. I had something like 56 offers when it was all said and done, but I took a visit to Penn State when they played Nebraska in 2002. Larry Johnson was the running back, and Michael Robinson was there. They had a bunch of guys that were really, really good, and I went there for this game. I think Nebraska was ranked 7th. Penn State was 24th, maybe 21st, something like that. And they beat the brakes off Nebraska in front of 110,000 people, and the atmosphere, I was like, okay.
I mean, the walkout, is that what they call it? When you come into the stadium?
Yeah.
I mean, if you haven't just YouTubed Penn State, Clemson, A&M, I mean, it chills,
there's nothing like it.
There's nothing like it.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really cool ones. I mean, Virginia Tech.
Is that the Inner Sandman?
They do the Inner Sandman, like. I mean, the Ohio State's really cool where they're ringing, like, the Hells Bells from AC/DC, and they're kind of, like, rocking. Like, there's some cool stuff.
So what is that feeling like when you're, like, coming through and you're about to go on the field? For the first time you did it, I mean, was it just insane?
Yeah. I mean, it's an adrenaline rush like no other, right? And that's the one thing that when you're done playing football, you probably miss the most, because that's literally the one thing you can never duplicate again. You can never duplicate ever walking onto a field for the rest of your life and the feeling you have when there's 100,000 people cheering either for you or against you. In my opinion, when they're cheering against you, I enjoyed it more.
Really?
Yeah.
So is there like a nervous like feeling and the excitement of like, okay, especially when you're a starter and you're coming out and now people know who you are and you're going to be on the field most of the time. You got to be like a little freaked out. Right?
Yeah, so that's the big thing, right? Like anybody that says that they don't get nervous is full of shit. Like,
Yeah.
they really are at the end of the day, because it's no matter if you're Tiger Woods playing in your 15th major that you're about to win, or the guy who's a true freshman at Penn State who's getting his first start. Like there's always nerves. Nerves are fine. They're good. They always say that. Like you want nerves. Like that's what gives you that fight or flight, right? And so, like in the football world, like I used to always just be like, okay, like some games were bigger than others, so like you'd feel the nerves a little more. But like in my mind, I'd always just be like, get that first hit out of the way. Like once I felt that first hit, once I felt that first, head pop of the helmet, I'm like, here we go.
Trey, let's try to find like the clips for the walkouts. Is that what they're called? Okay, so when we put this, at least people can see it, because it is. I've gone on like these like in the middle of the night, looking through YouTube, and they're saying it was 4 hours later. And I've done every school, every sport. Oh,
yeah. The one to find, if you can find it, do like type in "whiteout zombie nation." If you see that, it's ridiculous.
I almost want to watch it right now. It is really. Have you ever done that? Have you ever seen these? Okay, yeah, you know what we're talking about. All right, so when you were in high school, were you running back? Because a lot of guys I know that as they get bigger, right, they change positions. But were you always?
I was always lineman. Yeah, I was always lineman. I mean, you play different positions, right? Like, so I obviously moved to center, and center was where I ended up being. But I was an offensive tackle, defensive tackle in high school. Got recruited for both. I was pretty good on defense, and actually went to Penn State on defense.
Okay.
So of like the 56 offers, let's say 53 of them were to go play offense and play center or guard, right? 3 of them were to play defense. I'm the dummy that chooses one of the schools that offers me to play defense, knowing, well, I know now, but not knowing at the time, but 7 or 8 months later, they moved me over to offense. Right. So they kind of just told me what I wanted to hear for the most part, and then
you were fast too, right? So
I could run.
There's clips of you. Obviously, they're saying you're speedy. But the offensive line, you said like the dumb one, but they're usually the most intelligent guys on the team, correct?
Yeah,
especially
100%.
The centers, right? You got to deal with a lot of.
Yeah, that's the big thing, right? Like defense is more instinctual, right? Yeah. Like it's more like, I can really dumb it down to the average and just say see ball, get ball, right? Like it's really like, there's obviously a little bit more to it, right? But it's see it, go get it, right? And on offense, it's literally.
You're involved in every single play.
You're involved, and you have to know, and there's so much to it. Like everybody just thinks we're just running into each other up in, on the line of scrimmage, and it's so much more to that. And that's the stuff I always appreciated is, before I go on this tangent, like getting back to what you were saying, it's center has to know everything because he's the one making all the calls. He's the one he's the quarterback of the offensive line, putting everybody in the right position, and he's the one telling both guards, both tackles. Half the time he's telling the quarterback, we're going to this guy, or he's the guy and we're going to this guy, whatever it may be. And from that point, the guards and the tackles still have to know a lot too, because then from there, they got their own assignment, because we could be sliding right. So now left guard, left tackle, they're their own entity, right? And so there's so much that goes into the offensive line play. And the part that I enjoyed the most when I was playing was you practice everything all week. You literally go into every week feeling like you have gone over every single look. I'm just going to throw a team out there that the Patriots have shown up to this point, right? And so you get out there, and you're like, I know everything they're going to do. I've never felt more comfortable going into a game. And then you get out there, and they come out in a different defense than you've never seen before.
Right.
And you're like, okay, here we go. Now we gotta figure this out. Now it's a chess match.
And so that's kind of, I don't want to get too far ahead here, but
yeah,
you're doing some of that stuff now, but like watching you do it is pretty incredible because you don't really think about all the nuances going on. And again, I hate to skip around, but I've watched enough stuff before we did this, but him breaking down all the linemen of where they're going to shift and where the defensive end or the linebackers, where he's supposed to go, where they think he's going to have this opening, and then that everybody pushes, the tight end slides over and it pushes this guy, so the running back comes. I don't know unless you're like playing, I don't think you really understand like how. And the average football fan wasn't really like a high level football player, so right, so yeah. There's so much. That's why I think the intelligence side of the coaches goes so far. So you got drafted out of Penn State to go to the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Pittsburgh Steelers, yep.
So your home state, right? So that's a big deal.
Blessing and a curse. It really was. It really was. It was, I get drafted in the 7th round. So I just rewind just a tad, right? So I finished my Penn State career. I get named first-team All-American, Big Ten Offensive Lineman of the Year. I win the Remington Trophy. So I have about as decorated a college career as you can possibly have. So in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to be first-round pick.
Yeah.
Well, then now the picking apart starts to happen. And what that entails is it's literally the difference of you going in the 1st round to the 7th round is an inch in length in your arms. It's an inch in length in your height. It's a 10th in the 40 time, and when you're running, it's there's so many minuscule things that go into that. And
How big were you?
When I came out, I was 6'1" and an eighth, and 308, I think, is what I measured in at the combine. And if I was 6'2", and so my arm length was 29 inches at the combine, if it was 31 inches and I was 6'2", I would have went in the 1st round.
Right.
It was that much of a difference. I literally got a call from a legendary offensive line coach who was coaching in the NFL at the time. He was like, hey, here's the deal. Everybody watches your film. They love you. Trying to convince them to draft you when you're not the automatic surefire pick to the GMs and the guys upstairs, it's hard because those guys are always going to make the safe pick, because if the safe pick fails, it's like, well, we went by the measurements, we went by this, everything said this guy was going to be a stud. But if you go on the guy who doesn't fit all the intangibles and he fails, then it's like, wow, the metrics said he was going to, right? And so that was kind of what I was like dealing with. So anyways, I go in the 7th round to Pittsburgh, and you know, everybody's just telling me, like, it doesn't matter where you get drafted. That's fine. Like, it matters what you do when you get there. And, like, it's 100% true. I ended up playing longer than most of the centers drafted ahead of me in my class. And but when I went there, I go to Pittsburgh, and I have so many friends and family.
Yeah.
Just kind of – and my family was actually phenomenal. They were great. It wasn't them. It was going into, you know, the first game, and you get 35 texts from all your old boys, and it's like, I need 3 tickets, I need 4 tickets, I need 2 tickets. It's like, and
that's exhausting.
I'm going downtown, and I'm going out, and I'm partying more than I needed to be. I'm doing all the dumb stuff, and I'm like, oh, I just didn't take advantage of my first year. And after the year, they wanted to re-sign me, and I went to Philadelphia because of that. That was the sole reason. I was like, I just need to get out of here. I need to get away.
Yeah,
from everybody that knows.
Stayed in the state, but just got away from Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
I mean, that's got to be tough, especially just if you're not playing well either, and if you're not living up to the expectations.
Yeah.
And for you, you're probably like the god since you were like a little kid, right? So that you're shining all the way through, and then all of a sudden, it's high level pressure. Everybody's like you.
Yeah, everybody's yanking. I'm like, and I was just doing dumb stuff too, but. Saying the blessing and the curse, right? Bruce Arians was my offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh. And then I reunite with him a couple years later after Philadelphia, and I go to Indianapolis. And that was kind of – I made enough of an impression on him, even though I wasn't playing my first year, to then kind of transition into the rest of my career.
So was that moment, going in the 7th round, like the first time you've hit like any sort of like trials and tribulations in your life?
Yeah, for the most part. For the most part. Yeah, it was everything was smooth.
Yeah.
Everything was smooth up until that point. And then I mean, you're just filled with adversities and trials and tribulations your entire NFL career, no matter who you are. Like even the Tom Bradys of the world, right? Like he's obviously had as decorated of a career, but he also had some injuries. He's had some, he wasn't given a starting job early. He had to fight for a bunch of stuff early, and then there's so many things. When you think things are going to be smooth, there's something around the corner, usually is the way it works. And, for me, that was the feeling, always being on top and then not starting. I'm like, this is completely different. I don't know what this is. And then going to practice squad my first year, going to practice squad my second year, and then finally in the third year, I get the opportunity in Indy, and things started to go smooth for a while. And just when you think things are going to go smooth, then I get traded, and then still fairly smooth for the most part. And then, I move out to Arizona, and things are really smooth, really smooth, really smooth. I'm feeling really good, and then I tear my ACL. So there's always something, and how do you bounce back, right? And that's life, though.
And I think that's the big part about this that we talked about earlier about doing this podcast is like when we do these, it's like we spend the time to tell the backstory and stuff, but you know, I think what always hits mostly when we watch like the views, it's always the ones that are talking about like the tough stuff, right?
Yeah.
What's hard. So did you go through, were your parents there for you all this when you're going through all this stuff? And were you married yet, or?
So no, I wasn't married early in my career. And so like a lot of that stuff was just, you know, girlfriend or family, whatnot. My family is, I mean, I couldn't ask for anything more when it came to them in terms of support and what I did for all the years. Like when I was in Penn State, they wouldn't miss a game. I mean, they're driving from Pittsburgh to Madison, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
As soon as work's out on a Friday, they're driving through the night. They're staying in hotels. They're spending every penny they have right at that point. And then when I got to the NFL, same thing. Like they were, even when I came out to Arizona, it was unbelievable. I mean, if I had any East Coast games, they were there, and they'd always come out to 3 or 4 home games. So sister the same way. So I had the utmost support from that. And, you know, the one thing that my dad always said was like, he never wavered with knowing my ability, right? And so like the whole thing was like, you may not have gotten the opportunity yet, but when you do, you make sure everybody remembers that first opportunity so that you never get put back in this situation again. And I was like, so then that really struck home with me. And so I started just kind of preparing every time, even on practice squad. There's no chance really unless you get pulled up to play in a game. And when I was doing that, I was preparing and I was studying and I was learning the offenses and doing all the things, which has proved, you know, so much worth for me down the road, obviously. And when I was doing that, I was just thinking in my head, like, I could get called up this week. And if I do, this has to be the opportunity. And so fast forward to 2012, and I'm in Indianapolis, and still I make the team. I'm on the active roster, but I'm a backup to start the year.
Who's the quarterback at that time? Luck?
Andrew Luck.
Andrew Luck, all right. Arguably the best quarterback at that time.
He was unbelievable, and he was so smart.
Was he the best quarterback you played with?
No, I mean, I played with Brady.
Okay.
So got through that. Carson Palmer. I mean, I played with some good ones. Michael Vick. Ben Roethlisberger.
Vic stories. I bet you got some.
Joe Flacco's a Super Bowl MVP.
I mean, great arm.
You know, so I mean, I played with some good ones. I played with 5 number 1 overall picks at quarterback, which is kind of a little crazy.
And you just every time.
That's it.
Right in your butt.
Right up there, a little tickle. The joke's I always got more from my quarterbacks than I did from my wife. But getting back to Luck. So I go 2012, we're in Indianapolis, and first 3 weeks I'm not playing, and then I'm just doing like kickoff return and like field goal. I'm playing, but I'm not playing on offense. And then we get an injury to our starting center, and Bruce Arians is like, "You're starting this week. You're the guy." And we're getting ready to play Green Bay. Green Bay won the Super Bowl the year before. They got Aaron Rodgers, who's you can say everything about him as a quarterback, right? And they're rolling. They got a great team. They got B.J. Raji, who's a top 5 pick at nose guard. And I haven't played really any action in an NFL game. And my first game, we go out in Indianapolis, and we're losing 21-3 at halftime. And they're just beating the brakes off us, and we're like, oh. And I remember coming in at halftime being like, all right, we just need one play. We need one play. So we come out at half. We score. It's 21-10. We get an interception. It's 21-17. Now we got a game, right? So we're rolling. Anyways, we come back. We beat them. We score, get the 2-point conversion late. They miss like a 60-yard field goal. We win by 3. And I get done with that game. I'm exhausted. Like, while you're in the moment, you don't think about it, right? We played 101 offensive plays. Which is so many plays in an NFL game. A typical game is 65 to 70 plays, right? So we play 101. And so, like, my point is, if I wasn't in shape, if I wasn't putting in the work and ready, like, I would have been dead by halftime, right? And so I was prepared for the moment. I was prepared for that. And when I got it, I played well, and then that strung off 120 games in the NFL.
Did the guy that got hurt before you, did he come back and take his, like, how does that work?
So the way it works typically, like, your contract kind of says a lot, right? Yeah. So he was making more than me at that point, and they paid him on like a pretty decent 3-year deal. But I started a lot of games that year. I played I think I started 5 or 6 games, and I played in maybe 9 or 11 games on offense. So he was going through a ton of injury stuff that year.
How does it work relationship-wise with that guy?
It's fine. I mean, honestly, most of the times, like, you're boys with your position.
Yeah.
So, like, regardless of what happens, like, the situation may suck, but, like, you're still going through the same stuff with that guy. So, like, I was always super tight with all my guys. Like, whether I was starting or whether I wasn't, whether it was the backup. You know, if I'm the starter, I was always super tight because you're running everything off each other, right? Like, you're the ones making all the calls. So whenever the offense is installed, if it doesn't make sense, because a lot of times you get in this stuff, and some of these coaches, right? Like, they've never played, right? Like, they never played offensive line. So, like, it looks great on paper, but it's like, hold on a sec. Like, I've been in this situation. Yeah. When you put me in this, and this guy's firing off the edge, there's no way. Like, I can't see this and get to there, right?
Yeah.
Like, so you bounce all this stuff off other guys, and so you end up being super tight with the other guys.
Did that catapult you to, like, at that point when other teams were looking at you, you were going to be the starter? When they were
that was a huge. So that year and the next year were the two biggest years. So anyway, so I played really well in 2012. That year ends. We ended up losing to Baltimore in the first round of the playoffs, and that was the year Baltimore ended up winning the Super Bowl against San Fran in the Harbaugh Bowl. And so then that next spring, there's a lot of rumblings in the indie media that, like, oh, AQ is going to be the center of the future. Well, the other guy was making more money, right?
Yeah.
So what happens? First day of spring, I get called in. We're trading you to Baltimore. So I get traded to Baltimore. And there was, like, they weren't going to have any center controversy. There was none of that was going to happen. So I go there, and
did you have any friends there?
I mean, you have buddies just throughout the league on every team for the most part. So yeah, it was fine. And I get there, and I end up starting 13 games at guard, I think, that year. 11 games or 13 games, whatever it was, at guard. So between 2012, me proving that I can start at center and play a bunch of games at center, and then 2013, the knock on me was he's too short to play guard. So if he's not starting, why keep him on the roster? Because he can't play both, right? So then I start a bunch of games at guard. So between those 2 years was everything for
proving everybody wrong.
Yep, that was everything for my career.
Kelsey's like your size, right? He's only 6'1".
A little taller. He's like 6'2"-ish, 6'2.5", yeah.
He looks smaller when he's out there up against those other guys.
And he's not big. I mean, he's 280, 285, right? I played with Kelsey for a year.
You did?
I went the year they drafted him, and then that was my last year in Philly.
So did you ever have, like, a really dark time through all the, like, when did it start to go, like, all right, shit, dude, this is getting brutal?
It was, I mean, those first 3 years.
Yeah.
Those first 3 years, and you're like,
I'm going to quit. Did you ever go through that?
Nah, I mean, I never did that because I felt like as long as I was in a locker room and on a field, I felt like once I got an opportunity to prove that, I'd be fine. And, like, that was part of my dad. My dad just kept saying that over and over again. Whether or not I wanted to believe it or not, like, I just kept hearing it, so I had to believe it, right? And mental, I mean, what you tell your mind is everything, right? And so I just kept saying it. And then once I got the first start and the first time playing, I was good. But those first 3 years, I'm like, I'm playing better than this guy. What is happening? Why is he this? Like,
and it all came down to, I mean, obviously politics, but money. That's when you realize
sometimes it's money.
Business.
Sometimes, you realize the business. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes it's this guy was drafted and you weren't. And, when I was in Philly, whatever it may be, right? And there's just always something. And it might be you just got bad luck and you went to a team that had 5 veteran guys and 3 backups that are all coming back and there's no spot for you, right? And, like, that just kind of is the luck of the draw sometimes, but.
Do the teams ever offer, like, support for, like, guys going through, like, mental stuff like this? Like, and you're going, man, this is tough, or do you have to lean on your family for that stuff?
I mean, and the teams do, and the teams have, like, team psychologists.
Yeah.
And, they have stuff like that. But here's the one thing, like, it's a very individualized operation in the NFL because, like, at the end of the day, who signs everybody's paycheck that works for the team is the owner, right? And the front office people. So as a player, there's a lot of times because when stuff goes bad or when things go wrong in the NFL, like, as a player, like, they're going to cut you no matter what your contract is, right? Like, as long as you don't have guaranteed money, and sometimes even when you do have guaranteed money, they're just like, we're going to eat that.
Yeah.
You're gone, right? And so there's no loyalty from that aspect. So as players, there's a very untrustworthy vibe of upstairs, right? Like, they're very let's do everything outside of the building, outside of the house, right? And so when it comes to people's strength training in the off season, when it comes to the nutritionist, when it comes to their, psychologist person, whatever it's, whatever nutrition, whatever it may be, most people are willing to spend on themselves outside of the building versus using people inside the building.
Well, there was that whole controversy with Tom Brady, right? Using his TB12 whole deal.
Yeah.
Like, they hated that.
Yeah.
They hated the fact that
they
had
do,
that guy.
because then they feel like they're almost getting cheated on, right?
Yeah.
That's the way they look at it. It's like, hey, we have all this stuff and you're using somebody else. But the reason being is because, one, you're scared of what's being reported upstairs, because at the end of the day, you want all your stuff to yourself and confidential. There's one. And then the second aspect that comes into this is sometimes, the programs may not always be because whether it's time constraints or whether it's a lot of strength coaches, I think, are scared to get guys hurt. So we may not push past the point of exhaustion, because at the end of the day, if this strength coach gets Tom Brady hurt or Michael Vick hurt in their prime, then it's like, what are you doing?
Right.
Why'd you push him so hard to get this guy hurt? Now you're fired, right?
Right.
So, there's always this. Are they doing just enough to make sure guys are in semi-decent shape? But then this guy is hold on, I need more. In order for me to be ready to put my body through 17 games, I need more.
When you came to Arizona, was your mindset that this is the last place you think you're going to be? Were you already kind of all right, my career's wrapping?
That was where I was at, yeah, and I felt good where I was at. And then I signed a second contract here, and I'm like, okay, cool. I'm just going to kind of finish here. And then the last year on my second deal is when I tore my ACL, and then my mindset just became straight Kobe Bryant, tunnel vision. How do I come back from this and still be a dog, right?
Yeah.
And I just went on a year-long, I have one mission, and that's to come back off this knee and get healthy and play, and I did that. And then I finished out that contract, and then I was like, I was okay with being done. I was kind of hoping I maybe got another deal in Arizona, and they were like, no, we got Kyler, we're going younger. I get it. I get the business. I was 33, maybe 34 at the time, and then Bruce Arians again.
Yeah.
Bruce Arians got another call, so ended up going down to Tampa and spending the last year with him, which was awesome.
So when you went to Tampa, you won a Super Bowl there. So when you went there, did he come with you? Hey, I want you to come here and be a leader, or, what was his role for you?
Yeah, that was basically it. It was, hey, man, if you end up starting and playing games, great. But at the end of the day, we got a good group down here. We got a chance to do this. We got Brady. And our offensive line at the time was really good. Center at the time, Ryan Jensen, a very good friend of mine, just literally was texting with him today. At that time was probably the best center in the NFL. So my whole goal was to go down there, and if anything were to happen, then I would slide in at center. Say something happened to Jensen, I'd go in at center. If something happened to the two guards, I'd go in at center, and Jensen would move to one of the guards. That was kind of the plan. But you can help these guys know the offense. It's a new offense. You know it better than anybody. You can be the leader you are in the locker room. You can kind of help in 30 different ways, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to go a long way. And that was kind of my thing. I was like, I'm just going to go down here and just kind of taking them. Well, then we get some injuries. I end up starting some games and doing that whole thing. But, yeah.
So what was it like with Gronk? What was he like?
Gronk is everything you see.
He's universal,
on TV.
So that's a question. I know that people that don't care about football, they all know him.
He's everything you see on TV.
Yeah.
The one thing that people don't realize, you get what you get from Gronk,
Right.
as a personality. What everybody sees is what you get, right? But what people don't realize, and I think this has something to do with New England. This is why they were so successful for so long, whether it was Belichick or whether it was Brady. I don't know. Maybe it was a combination of both, whatever. But I remember watching film, the first 2 weeks I was down there and watching Gronk just catch a crossing route. Most guys catch a crossing route. They turn upfield for 10, they shut it down. But watching him run 100%, catch the ball, turn upfield, finish in the end zone, doing stuff that your middle school coach preaches, but maybe gets lost in translation the higher up you get and the more elite you get, right, as a player. But just watching him and Brady do everything the way they're supposed to do it, better than everybody else on the field in terms of not just skill level, but just effort. And I'm like, oh, okay.
That's the difference.
That's the difference. That makes sense.
I mean, I was watching Edelman's podcast, and he always says that Gronk's also one of the smartest dudes he knows. He's like from a math standpoint too, finances. Like that's why he's got. I mean, he has all his money that he never spent any money from any check.
Yep.
He has
It's
every
all
single bit of it.
off-field stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, off-field stuff, and he's very like conscious of like spending and stuff. But it's just like he knows everything about football, like studies it, and you think he's dumb the way, but he's really, really smart. So did you think about coaching then when you went back that last time and with Arians?
Yeah, that was kind of one of the things. Like when I was in Arizona, I kind of brought it up to him. I mentioned it to him, and I was like, oh, I think like I might want to get into coaching with this. He's like, I think that's a great idea. I think you'd be phenomenal at that. And so in my mind, like that's what I always kind of my last 5 or 6 years, that was my plan for life after, right? Life after football was going to be, I'm going to be a coach. And I got hurt the year we won the Super Bowl, and so like my last 7 or 8 games, like I wasn't in uniform because I got hurt on a Monday night game in November, and I needed something to like. You want to talk about a dark place too? I was like, now my career's over. Like I know football's over, right? And so then I needed something to kind of keep my mind off of that. So I went to him immediately and was like, anything I can do to help out, like coaching, whether I can, and even if I can start to learn this trade a little bit, whether I can sit in meetings on Tuesday with the coaches or whatever it may be. And that year was like a little weird because that was the COVID year. There was all kind of rules, and technically since I was still a player, the rules were players are out of the building Monday and Tuesday while they like cleaned it like a hospital, right?
Right.
And but every time we would finish, I would help out the coaches, and anything I saw, I'd kind of bring it to them. But on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday after practice, I would go in with the coaches and watch the film and see how they talked about it and graded it and did all that. And it was a little eye-opening at times because like the way I see it versus the way like a coach sees it was different at that point. And but I got a leg up, right? And so then we win the Super Bowl, and basically right before we're doing our parade, we have our exit meetings. They call them exit meetings. So as soon as the season's over, you have these exit meetings. Players go in, they meet with, your individual coach, your coordinator, and maybe the head coach for a minute, and you just kind of. It may be as simple as, "Hey, great year. We'll see you next year because you're still under contract," or it may be your contract's up and it's, "Hey, let's talk. Like, we love you. We're going to try and get this deal done." Whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But it's some point maybe talking about the future. I remember sitting in that thing, and the offensive line coach at the time was like, "Hey, he wants you to start coaching like now." One of our coaches got a job elsewhere, and he's like, "He wants you to slide into his job." And I'm like, "Perfect. This is great."
Yeah.
Here we go. And so we do the parade. Now I like immediately switch into like coaching mode. Still coming off COVID year. A little weird. Like they didn't let the coaches come back until like July. So whereas normally you'd be in the building and doing all that, now you're doing everything remote. So like we're doing Zoom meetings. I'm grading offensive linemen coming into the draft from my house. Like it was actually a great schedule for like a coach. I was like, this is unbelievable. But then we get back. I show back up in July, and we start training camp. And I was in training camp for a month, and I was like, I don't know about this.
Really?
And then I got through September, and in 2 months, I had 2 kids at the time. I think my wife was pregnant with the third or almost pregnant with the third, but I maybe saw my kids a total of 3 hours in 2 months. And
wow.
I was like,
that's a workaholic job.
Yeah, and I can say this, Bruce Arians' schedule's better than any other schedule amongst coaches in the NFL. So that being the best schedule, and I saw my kids 3 hours. So God forbid I was with another team. I'd never see them. So I'm like, I don't know if this is it for me. I think there's other ways I can make an impact or do something and go from there.
So you started doing the, I don't know if I would say analysis or analyst stuff with Pat. So just talk a little bit about your relationship with Pat.
Yeah, so we go way back. So going back to probably piggybacking 20 minutes now, but the decorated college career, right? When I finish that and I get all these awards, right? There's this college football awards show they do from Disney World every year on ESPN. You've probably seen it.
Yep.
And so we all fly down for that, and I'm up for the center award. Pat's up for the punter award in the same year. And from Pittsburgh, so I like to have a good time. Like to have some drinks. He's from Pittsburgh. We grew up 30 minutes from each other. He's at West Virginia. Everybody's like in their rooms at like 10 o'clock, and we both are like poking our head out the thing. He's like, what are you doing tonight? I'm like, what are you doing tonight? He's like, well, we had some drinks. So we go out, we have a good time, real good time, and kind of hit it off, and we go our separate ways. And then we actually got drafted 4 picks apart from each other. I got drafted 226th overall. He got drafted 4 picks ahead of me, 222 to Indy. And stayed in touch a little bit, nothing crazy. And then 2012, I signed with Indy. We're walking through the hall. He's rehabbing like a knee injury from the previous year. He's like, what are you doing here? I'm like, they're about to sign me. He's like, yo, we got drunk a couple years ago. He's like telling the GM. And I'm like, I don't know if I want him to know that. He's like, you'll be fine. And so, anyways, hit it off. He was in my wedding. I was in his wedding. We go way back. But the way that his show, once it started to blow up, like we would FaceTime. We talk all the time. And I remember FaceTiming him one time. It was right when Dan Orlovsky was starting to get big with his analyst role. And I don't think Dan was on ESPN yet. Maybe he was, but I know he was doing a bunch of stuff on Twitter at the time, now X. And Dan, every time he would break down like a protection that broke down, he would always blame it on the offensive line. I'm like, hold on a sec. So I FaceTime him the one time, and I'm like, yo, you see Orlovsky's breakdown? He's like, what happened? I'm like, well, it's a simple slide to the will protection. The running back missed the block. He went out, supposed to block the will, but he's blaming it on the offensive line, saying it's the offensive line fault. It's not the offensive line fault. This guy is wrong, right? Like, I'm like saying this. He's like, you want to come on my show and talk about this fall? I'm like, perfect.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I was born.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you called him, did you have any thought in your mind like,
no,
I should be working with Pat anyways, or
no? I mean, I never. Him and I are so tight. Like, I never wanted to be like,
take care of me.
Hey, can I get a job? You know? And, but like, whenever we kind of talked about it, it made a lot of sense, and it's been good. I mean, the thirst for, like you said, right? Like the way I speak it, it's very natural, and I understand it. But like to a lot of people, it may seem like algebra or something Spanish or whatever, right? Yeah. And so when I started doing it, Matt Hasselbeck actually gave me some advice because he'd been on ESPN now for a couple of years, and he was backup quarterback to Luck when I was in Indy. And so him and I have been friends for a lot of years. He was like, when you do these breakdowns, try and explain them as if you're explaining them to your grandma. And break it down duo might mean 2 double teams to you, but explain what this double team is and why it's called a double team, and why this double team is called this, and why this double team is called this, and all these different things. Like, break it down to every single nuance where when your grandma or your mom watches it, it makes sense to her. And so that's kind of the approach I've tried to take. Well,
I think that being an analyst is still going to be hard, and it's still not, even though you know everything there is to know about it, you have to have like all the other traits as well, because you have a lot of guys that try it that just can't verbally speak it.
Sure.
Well, it doesn't come across well. They mumble, or so I mean, it's not easy, right? No. So I mean, you have to still it's a constant learning process, right? Do you practice? Like, I mean, what's the routine when you know you have to do it?
The big thing with me is, like, I understand scheme so well, but I only understand scheme in the terminology and the language that I played in, right? Yeah. I played in Bruce Arians' scheme, right? So, one of his favorite running plays might be called this, and Sean McVay calls it something completely different, or in the West Coast offense with Andy Reid or whoever else, it may be called something completely different. Fortunately for me, I played under Andy Reid. I played under Cliff Kingsbury, who comes from the Sean McVay world of terminology, and then I played for Bruce, who comes from, that whole tree of learning, right? And so I think that's why I'm able to kind of convey a lot of things in different ways, is because I've had all of the different languages, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, everybody runs the same plays.
Yeah.
You may add a shift, you may add a motion, you may have some eye candy attached to it, or you may have something else that goes with it. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to everybody's running the same stuff, and they may get to it in different ways, shape, or form, right? But and that's what I do. Like, so when I watch it, that's what the cool part for me is too, is like watching it and watching Mike McDaniel down in Miami get to a duo type play, which is 2 double teams, right? But they're doing it different than I've ever seen before. Like that's what my favorite part is showcasing that.
What's your take on him? Because he's not a player. I mean, he actually was a college player, I guess, right?
Yeah,
I think he played
everybody's played it.
Like
yeah, everybody's played it somewhere.
Right, but he's the guy that just does not look like but I think he comes across as a great guy. Like, people love him.
I absolutely love him. And everything I've heard, I'm real close with the 49ers O-line coach. And when I talked to him, when he left, that was like the biggest loss. Like, everybody gives Shanahan a ton of credit, which he deserves a ton of credit. He's a stud. He's an absolute stud. He was the originator of this version, right? McDaniel, from what everybody says, is all of the cool things they were doing in the run game were a lot of him just being outside the box.
Yeah.
And you see it with what he's doing down in Miami, too. It's awesome.
So what's your mindset like today? Like, I know you have the deal with Pat, and you're doing that a couple days a week, or you're going to start doing that a couple days a week. Obviously, you're a dad. You obviously are golf a lot because you're a good golfer, as we know. So are you still trying to figure out what you want to do? You think you know what you want to do, or you don't have to do anything and you're good?
No, I mean, listen, like I've been smart with what I have put away from my playing days, but I still need a purpose, right?
Yeah.
Like I need a something to wake up in the morning and get me out of bed, right? And so, and I enjoy working. I do. I enjoy the grind, and I enjoy staying in my lane. My lane's the football world, and like that's the one thing that people don't understand. Like with people that come out of the NFL or people that come out of professional sports or the military, right? And then they have to go back in and get a job. Well, if they have a 15-year career, guys that they graduated college from are 15 years into their new career. And so now I'm going to go be a medical salesperson, right? I'm 15 years behind people the same age as me. Like, I'm not just going to get handed something, right? And, like, I think people don't fully understand that. But fortunately for me, I've been able to kind of stay in this football world. And so I went from coaching right into this media thing. And for me, I love it. I love kind of expanding on it, growing on it. It started off just doing the McAfee thing, and then McAfee had me I did like one of the simulcasts, like they do like the two telecasts during the college football playoffs. So I got to do that the 1 year, and that was really cool, actually being like a sideline reporter in a very relaxed, man-cavey, nonchalant role. It was TCU, Michigan, and it was me, Taylor Lewan, RG3, and Cole Kublik, who's a sideline reporter in the SEC. That was a really cool gig for me.
Did RG3's did his wife about to have? Did she get?
That was during that game.
Okay, so she was delivering a baby, and he literally. Well, he's like, my wife's in labor.
Rumor.
Okay,
that's the rumor.
Okay, but he left the
field. The telecast.
Yeah,
so there's just the 3 of us to finish the game. Yeah, so did that, and then I've done. I did McAfee again last year, and I had some expanded roles there where I was live from Columbus when Penn State, Ohio State played. For his set for the McAfee show Friday in Columbus. And then this year, I've picked up some more stuff. So I'll be doing the McAfee thing. And then I was wearing the shirt earlier. I was going to say my shirt. But Underdog Fantasy, which is another company that does streaming for fantasy sports, be doing a show with them. So it's me, Colt McCoy, Justin Pugh, former guard in the league, and then Jay Gruden. The 4 of us will be doing a show called Clean Pocket. And then in the off season, I train guys. So I had 4 NFL guys that I trained. I had Tevin Jenkins, who's going to be a dog for the Chicago Bears. Robert Hainsey, who's offensive lineman for the Buccaneers. I trained Jordan Morgan, who was the 25th pick overall for the Packers. Had a kid, Vidarian Lowe, plays for the Patriots, and had another kid, Brandon Walton, who plays for the Buccaneers. So I had 5 guys that I trained this off season. So for me, I love the couple different niches that I've carved out and can still stay in football and do some media during the season, do some training in the off season, but then I still have all the time with my family.
So your shirt is the Navy SEAL shirt, right? We didn't talk about this, but I'm assuming. But you did talk about the fact that you love the Sean Ryan show, or you listen to a lot of that stuff. So like, are you into are you doing any philanthropic stuff? Are you doing any of that sort of thing, or
I do
foundation stuff?
Yeah, so I try and do as much as I can to help the service guys out, right?
Yeah.
Like that's like my passion. That's kind of, I have more respect for those guys than anybody else on this planet, right? And so I read all their books. I've tried and copied versions of their mindset to try and help me in everything I do. And so I become friends
like
with
water fasting, like you're doing right now.
Yeah, like just being a crazy person and not eating for 5 days. But same thing, like when things get hard, like how do we endure and push through that, right? Like that's everything that they stand for, right? And so for me, I did a bunch of stuff last year for the Special Forces Charitable Trust, which they do a ton of stuff to benefit the Army Rangers. My buddy does a bunch of stuff, former Navy SEAL, but he does some stuff for the SEALs Future Foundation. I've done a bunch of stuff with them. TO, yeah. Yep.
Did you know what the Thunderbirds were, by the way, before you became a Thunderbird?
I knew what they were.
Yeah, okay.
I didn't know what all it entails. I'm still learning.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, every week I'm learning. But doing a bunch of stuff with them, right? Like that's a really cool thing for me. And like that's
so this will be your first Waste Management Open as a Thunderbird.
This will, yeah.
That's cool. That's
for me,
gonna be fun.
Like when I first joined, that was like the coolest thing for me. It was like I'd wanted to get more involved in some Phoenix stuff and didn't really know the route to go. And it's cool that they have so many events that just kind of pop in your calendar. Like, hey, go do this. Right. You can go do this. You can go do this. I can just.
And it's also cool that you get to the opportunity to meet so many different people from different industries and the people that are just massively successful and doing things that other than football. That's right. Correct, yeah. And then you're like living in a world, and it's just like you're just a normal guy to them.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
You can just sit at a table, and this guy might have his own plane. Yeah. This guy played in the NFL. This guy played Major League Baseball. This guy's a dentist. This guy's a commercial real estate star.
Yeah.
And it's like everybody's just shit talking each other and kind of
it's like you're in the locker room again.
Exactly.
That's awesome. So, what is? I just lost my train of thought. We'll cut this part out. Oh yeah, Trish.
Good time for me to ask a question.
Yeah.
Okay. So we were talking before the show. You've got 3 kids.
Yep.
2, 4, and 6, right?
Yep.
Is your oldest a girl?
Two oldest girls.
2 oldest are girls.
Yeah.
Okay, so your son's still like a toddler. So you haven't really gone into the hardcore sports stuff yet.
Right.
I did it with all 3 kids. The club sports.
Is this on camera?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's on camera.
Okay, cool. Sorry.
Right. I'll take on my question.
Okay.
So cut that out.
Okay.
So, as a parent of kids who played competitive, like club level sports, there were a lot of like crazy ass parents, right? On the sidelines, yelling at their kids, at the blocks, trying to tell the swimmer to adjust their toe by a quarter inch. What do you think of those parents? I mean, did you have those types of parents, and did that help get you there, or do you think those people are just crazy?
It's a great question. That's a great question. I got a story. I hope my dad doesn't hate me after this. My dad was very hard on me. He was very he was never like as into reading and learning all these like mind tricks you can play as I am, because now I read all these books of the SEALs and all these guys and all the little mental warfare that goes on in there. But he kind of had his own way about doing that. I know when I was a kid, like he was always hard on me. He would always preach like, we're not quitting, like no matter what, like we're going, we're doing this. You signed up for this. We are doing this. And I remember as I started to get, I was always a pretty good athlete, but then when I started to get to high school, it was, I was a pretty good basketball player in addition to football. So I'm on the high school basketball team, and we were really good. We won the state championship, but I'd score some points, and like I'd have a really good game. I'd score like, I don't know, I'm just gonna throw a number out, 26 points or something in a game, and I'd come out of the game afterwards, and everybody'd be all fired up. We just won. I played really well, and my sister would see me, hey, great game. And my mom, hey, great game. And I'd see my dad, and he's like, you should have had 30, and he'd walk away, and I'm like, okay, here we go. And I'd go home. It'd be 9 o'clock after a game, 9:30 after a game, and I'd put the lights on outside, and I'd go shoot free throws or do something, right? And so same thing in football. Like, I'd have 8 tackles and a sack. He's like, yeah, if you would have hustled on the backside, you would have had 11 and 2 sacks. Or like, it was always kind of needling. I remember when I started getting real big into training, once I started getting a bunch of offers, I was like, okay, now I just need to keep going. And then like one day I'd be like, I just want to go to the pool with my friends or something. And he'd be like, I was on rivals.com, which is like a big like recruiting service. He's like, I was on rivals.com, and Eric Wood, I just read online that Eric Wood's running hills in California right now. Or like he'd like bring up some center from another thing.
Yeah.
I'd be like, all right, I'm gonna go run, and do stuff like that. But I think there's a fine line, there's a balance that you have to play. Like I also think certain kids can handle it and certain kids can't, right? Like I think I can go hard on my 6-year-old right now. Like I know, like she's got the same mind that I have. Like she wants to be perfect. She wants everything to be right. She wants to be good at everything. She wants to, no matter what she's doing, I could just throw the monkey bars out there. She's not stopping until she skips 2.
Right.
Right. Like whereas like my middle child's like, she doesn't get on the first one. She's like, I'm done. And if I sit there and just start hammering her, she's going to cry. She's going to run away. She's going to be out. Right. And so you just have to find what makes people tick, I think. But yeah, I think there's an interesting thing when it comes to parents. Like I think you can either go too far and drive them one way, or it can be the right thing for that person, or I think there's so many different psychological variables you can play into that.
Let me back up this question here then. So when you started having trouble, or when you're like your first 3 years, when you were like, this is hard, is that when your dad flipped the other side and he was like supportive now?
He was always supportive, right? But
bad
I think,
word, sorry.
No. I know what you're saying. He was always, like he still would needle, right? But
Yeah.
but like the whole thing that he would do was, I think he felt like all the stuff up to that point was part of the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then when it became that, it was like more of like, don't veer off course of like understanding why you're here and where you are, right? Like it was trust in your process and everything that got you here, and just keep doing it and just keep doing it and wait for that opportunity. It wasn't like we need a whole new course of action here, right? Like we need a whole new, let's go somewhere else. No, like you've done all the right things. You just need the opportunity. So that was
It's funny. This story is almost cliche for like most of so many really successful people. It's like the same story. The dad tells us, hey, well, there's a guy across town. I could have sworn I've heard this story before. You know what I'm saying? Like you hear it all. Christian McCaffrey talks about it too, about Ed, his dad.
Mm-hmm.
Like the amount of shit. He said the same thing. He's like, well, my dad's going to get pissed at me right now when he sees this.
yeah.
But he used to do this, and this to us, and and make sure that we were doing. But it's funny because it works, like you said, though, but only on the right people.
It works when it works.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think that's the best way to put it. Like it's like, and you don't know if it's going to work until it works.
Yeah.
I think that's the hardest part of it, because it's like there's so many times where like I react a certain way to one of my kids, and my wife's like, that's not going to go well with her. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, it's the only way I know, because like my 6-year-old, like my neighbor, here's a good story about my 6-year-old. You want to hear the crazy parent story? I'm literally like doing soccer stuff in the backyard with my 6-year-old, and my next door neighbor's a pro baseball player, and his wife's in the sports world too. And she texts my wife at like 8 a.m. She's like, who's AQ training over there? And it's my 6-year-old daughter. And I'm like, what are you doing?
You're better than this. What was your mom doing when your dad was like this with you? Just like, oh, no, it's your dad.
So my mom is, ironically, this is going to sound crazy because I just gave the story of like me and my dad are very similar. My mom is a pit bull. Like she is the most, like a lot of the traits that I have come from my mom. Like the persistence, the stubbornness, the drive, the determination, all that stuff. Like that is my mom. She has zero athletic ability. She has no understanding of anything I've ever done in a sport. But is the one that is at the games, and it's like, I remember like, I'll go back to basketball, like it's silent in a crowd. I'm like getting ready to shoot a free throw, and you hear this crazy lady saying, bend your knees. Like, you know what I mean? Like she's like, it's like, can you shut up? It's like, but she's always like, and after games, like even after NFL games, she'd be like, third quarter, there was like a play where like didn't look right. And I'm like, yeah, Mom, I got beat. Like I gave up a sack. Like I get it. Like, but it's like that's kind of, they both have a little needling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is your wife similar to you, or is she more chill?
She's similar to me too. She's a grinder. She kind of, when we get into arguments, it's fireworks. It doesn't really mesh well. It's like throwing water on oil. But she's the best. Like she really is. Like she gets it, and like she understands. Like sports are my world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like when it comes to like mindset or like coaching or doing all that stuff, like she'll kind of just like let me take the lead, and then when it comes to empathy, which I don't really have much of, that's where she takes the lead.
Yeah. Do you think she's going to be similar to either of your parents when the kids start playing sports, or is she going to be just?
I think probably.
Yeah.
I think because she's got like, listen, she was a number one sales rep in her company, like so she's got like
she's
that
got
drive,
the competitive
and all that. Like again, she's the same thing. Like if I told her I played center in the NFL, she'd be like, see ball, get ball.
Right, yeah.
Like,
that's cool. So she's super supportive of whatever it is you got going on now, and just wants you to be happy and figure out your next step. But obviously, I think everything you do, you probably have always, well, I know you've been successful at. So this is just like the next step, which is awesome to see. And dude, thanks for coming on and telling the story. And hopefully we can do it again when you're off your water fast and
drink some whiskey.
We can drink some whiskey.
There you go. No, this was perfect, man. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, dude, for sure. Thank you.